millions of years, they dominated the land. Then, a two-legged predator invaded their world and changed it forever. Now these giants live only in our imagination. The majestic, mysterious mammoths. Black hills of South Dakota pulse with life. Jackrabbits and coyotes, antelope and bison. But during the last ice age, 26,000 years ago, these hills rang out with the trumpeting of mighty creatures, no longer of this earth, the mammoths. In their day, no other animal could match their size or majesty. Even the fiercest of predators stayed clear of these giants as they grazed the rolling grasslands. 11,000 years ago, the mammoths suddenly vanished, but not before a fluke of South Dakota geography preserved a vivid time capsule of their lives and deaths. In 1974, at a site called Hot Springs, a contractor began leveling the ground for a housing project. His equipment hit something unusual: animal bones and a 7-foot-long tusk. Paleontologist Larry Eigenbrod, an expert on the prehistory of North America, was invited to the site. Impressed by the number of exposed bones, Eigenbrod urged that construction be halted. He has been involved with Hot Springs ever since.
When I initially came to the site, we saw between 4 and 6 mammoths. That was exciting in itself. But now, 21 years later, we found our 51st mammoth last week. That is exciting, and the story's not over yet because it's at least 30 feet of mammoth-bearing material beneath where I'm standing.
This is the world's largest collection of Columbian mammoths, a species related to the woolly mammoths, but unique to North America.
The Columbian mammoth, 14 feet high at the shoulder, more than twice my height, weighing up to 9 tons. That's like a big truck with a load on it. And no shaggy coat of hair. It was probably no more hairy than the average Asian or African elephant today. It was a warm zone animal. It had big tusks, about the same size, but they were more robust because it used these tusks to dig holes and maybe take branches off trees and so on.
All the Columbian mammoths found at Hot Springs also share another unique characteristic. All were victims of an ancient death trap. Around 26,000 years ago, an underground cavern collapsed and filled with water from a natural spring. This sinkhole might have looked like an ordinary pond, but it was 70 feet deep, with treacherously steep and slippery walls. In time, lush grasses would obscure these dangers and lure mammoths to their deaths. Some may have plunged into the pool, others perhaps slipped at water's edge. In either case, it was a one-way trip. Unable to scale the slippery walls, the huge beasts drowned or starved to death. Eventually, the Hot Springs sinkhole dried up as its walls broke down and sediment slowly filled the pit. Layers of deposits up to 3 feet deep separate the skeletons not just in space, but in time, allowing Eigenbrod to calculate a rough chronology of the site.
So we're looking at maybe as many as 100 mammoths that died over a period of up to 700, 750 years, maybe one a decade, or maybe two if somebody tries to pull their friend out and falls in too.
The story of Hot Springs seemed rather straightforward until the bones revealed one last fact. Nearly every one of the sinkhole victims was a young male in his prime. Fossils alone can't explain this bias. But 6,000 miles and a continent away, a living giant may help scientists solve this mystery. Mammoths no longer walk the earth, but some of their relatives do. The striking resemblance between elephants and mammoths stems from close family ties. For paleontologist Gary Haynes at the University of Nevada, elephant bones provide key anatomical benchmarks. The size and maturity of teeth are a function of age. Gender can be determined by the shape of the pelvic bones. Haynes applies these indicators to mammoth fossils. In this way, he can gather vital statistics about an animal that died thousands of years ago. But these details alone can't bring the ancient bones back to life.
We have nothing to study of mammoths except bones and teeth, but we can actually go a long way towards understanding their behavior by looking at a very close relative, the African elephant and the Asian elephant. We can study their social behavior, social structure, and understand, I think, a lot about how mammoths must have lived and died.
Mammoths and elephants share a common ancestor that arose in Africa. Around 5 million years ago, their bloodlines diverged. This common heritage means elephants can provide a living mirror of their long-lost cousins. Like elephants, Columbian mammoths were herbivores and probably spent most of their time foraging for vegetation. Their huge bulk would have needed some 770 pounds of food every day, a staggering 152,000 calories, washed down by over 40 gallons of water. Mammoth society was probably matriarchal, based on groups of 10 or more related females and their offspring. Young females would remain within their group. But as young males reached sexual maturity, around 10 years of age, they began to set out on their own to explore the environment. Free of family constraints, these adolescent males were adventurous but inexperienced. They would have been easy victims for a deadly trap like the sinkhole at Hot Springs. Only an immature male would have rushed so recklessly toward the sparkling water.
Mixed herds where there's females and young would probably prevent their young from going down into these things, but young males living on their own don't have the animals interfering with them, and they probably would do this over and over again. Each animal would find itself entrapped, unable to get out.
Experience and maternal instinct saved most mammoths from the hazard that was Hot Springs, South Dakota, over 26,000 years ago. The site's preponderance of young male victims now makes tragic sense, but a far greater tragedy remains unsolved. The Columbian mammoth is extinct. This simple fact fuels a lifelong passion in Larry Eigenbrod.
This is a mammoth that's unique to North America, and this is where we begin to find out some of the answers to the mysteries of how this animal lived and died, and maybe even why it became extinct.
Eigenbrod aims to find out why the mammoths suddenly vanished around 11,000 years ago. His quest will take him to an unlikely place, a remote and desolate island where the forces of evolution took an intriguing twist. 30 miles off the coast of California, paleontologist Larry Eigenbrod seeks clues to the extinction of the mammoths. Part of a national park, the tiny island of Santa Rosa supports little more than birds and a colony of seals. But in 1994, a team of geologists stumbled upon a collection of large animal bones along the island's shore. Eigenbrod was flown in. He identified the bones as the most complete skeleton ever found of a pygmy mammoth. This unusual species was recognized over a century ago from isolated bones, but received little scientific scrutiny for decades. Today, Eigenbrod returns to Santa Rosa to investigate these strange creatures.
I'm going to look at this slope a little, Don.
Okay.
This about where that tusk was you were telling?
It's down here just a little ways, I think. And
With park archaeologist Don Morris, Eigenbrod hopes to locate additional pygmy mammoth remains. His goal is to understand how these pint-sized mammoths evolved and how they vanished.
Yeah. That's him, all right.
Yeah, you can see the whole circumference there.
Uh-huh.
We're not going to have much time with the tide coming in.
It's always that way out here.
Earlier in the season, Don Morris had spotted a flash of white lodged among the sediments on this steep slope. After some careful digging and the removal of loose dirt, a treasure is revealed.
What we got here is a tusk. It's undoubtedly a pygmy mammoth tusk from the diameter of it, and we'll try to remove some of the overburden and see how long it is and what shape it's in. Well, if it's a short one, it won't be as hard to take out.
Pygmy mammoths resembled the Columbian mammoth in nearly every aspect but size. They probably stood no more than 6 feet at the shoulder, less than half the height of a Columbian mammoth. Their estimated weight, a mere ton, pales beside the 10 tons of their full-size counterpart.
Under the tip here, and one of those slats we brought should be plenty.
Yeah.
Bit by bit, Eigenbrod pieces together the mysterious origins of the pygmy mammoths. He believes their ancestors were the Columbian mammoths who lived along the coast of California. Around 20,000 years ago, a natural disaster, perhaps a fire or a prolonged drought, destroyed the mammoths' grazing grounds. Sea levels were lower, and Santa Rosa lay only 4 miles from the mainland. Coastal breezes carried the scent of its vegetation to the hungry mammoths. It was a matter of swimming or starving. The mammoths followed their noses.
The journey they made about 20,000 years ago must have been rather traumatic for the mammoths. Stress from the mainland caused them to take to the sea, and they're like a big nuclear submarine with a peculiar snorkel as they're swimming. Actually, that snorkel's their locator too, because they smell the vegetation, and even if they couldn't see the island, they'd swim to it.
The mammoths came ashore on an island we would hardly recognize today. 20,000 years ago, Santa Rosa was covered in lush grasses and thick with trees. To the mammoths, this was Eden. This was home. Eventually, all memory of the mainland was erased. But then the world began to change. Around 11,000 years ago, the Ice Age was coming to an end. Polar ice caps began to melt. Sea levels rose. Inexorably, some 70% of the surface of Santa Rosa was submerged, reducing the island to its present size. Agenbrod's research indicates that food resources on the island were dramatically reduced. Smaller mammoths needed less to eat and were favored by natural selection. In just 9,000 years, what had been a race of 14-foot giants gradually evolved into a population of pygmies, and then died out. But shrinking mammoths are not unique to Santa Rosa. Off the north coast of Siberia, on Wrangel Island, paleontologists have found the remains of dwarf woolly mammoths, a case of parallel evolution. Studies show these dwarf mammoths clung to life until about 4,000 years ago. But around the world, mainland mammoths succumbed much earlier. As the climate warmed, the grasslands that had sustained the great beasts gave way to forests in the south, treeless tundra in the north. By 10,000 years ago, both the Columbian and the woolly mammoth were extinct. The world changed drastically at the end of the Ice Age. Perhaps the mammoths could not adapt. Or perhaps the agent of their doom was not climate at all. Another theory lays blame on a two-legged predator, armed with cunning and stone tools. Mammoths first spread to North America over 1.5 million years ago. They would vanish shortly after newcomers arrived on the continent around 11,000 years ago. Following the same route the mammoths had taken eons earlier, a wave of human beings entered the New World across a land bridge that linked Asia to North America. These early Americans would be named the Clovis people, for the New Mexico town where their distinctive stone tools were first found. Their razor-sharp Clovis points have been unearthed at over a dozen sites in association with mammoth remains. The evidence is clear, says paleontologist Paul Martin at the University of Arizona.
These points are found in many places across the country, these Clovis points, and at times they are found together with the bones of the mammoth, and occasionally even with carved bones of the mammoth. So this is the smoking spear, as it were, that links together the discovery of America, the arrival of people we call Clovis hunters, the disappearance of these large animals, the largest of them being the mammoth, and all of this is happening many thousands of years before Columbus enters the New World.
Armed only with stone tools, small bands of Clovis people might seem a minor threat to a species that dominated a continent. But mammoths had never been hunted before and may have been easy prey. Hunters need not have killed all the mammoths, just enough to steadily reduce the animals' birth rates. This argument would also explain the extinction of woolly mammoths. In Eurasia, they had coexisted with humans for nearly 500,000 years. But 11,000 years ago, human populations were expanding. Hunting activity may have dramatically increased. Few would disagree that humans killed mammoths for food and raw materials. Still, many experts cling to the theory that climate was the culprit in the mammoth's demise. Perhaps the idea that our ancestors obliterated the gentle giants is simply too painful to contemplate.
I think we've been reluctant to own up to the possibility that prehistoric people could have done something so so incredibly destructive of nature, of wildlife is concerned. But I don't think we should discount the possibility that prehistoric people thousands of years ago, under an unusual circumstance, actually exterminated the mammoth.
In the end, human hunters may have merely tipped the balance for an animal already pushed to the edge of extinction by climate change. We may never know. Only 11,000 years ago, a fleeting moment in evolutionary terms, mammoths roamed the earth. It may be their closeness that saddens Larry Agenbrod most of all.
This is an Ice Age animal that we coexisted with until just relatively recently. People lived with mammoths. When we get into dinosaurs, only the comic strip people lived with dinosaurs, but we lived with mammoths, and they're gone now, and I think we're the worse off for it.
Their flesh sustained us. Their hides kept us warm. Their very stature inspired legends. Though they vanished just a few steps shy of the modern age, they helped our kind cross that threshold. Mammoths are a part of us. As we unravel the mysteries of their fate, we just may learn a lesson about ourselves.